Hey everyone, this is Kandace and Sher with Processing Trauma Out Loud. And today, Sher and I have a really special episode. Actually, we're going to have 3 episodes with some women that Sher and I have just come to know and love, not just through our shared journeys of doing story work and healing from childhood trauma, but more recently, Sher and I got to hear a webinar that these 3 ladies hosted. And we were both just really taken back by the conversation, the specific topics that they addressed. And we knew we wanted to bring it to our listeners, Share.
Yeah.
And so today I'm just going to have each one of these ladies introduce themselves. And then I'll go ahead and say this, that this topic that we are going to be addressing today is the topic of differentiation. What it is, what it means, what it looks like, how does that play out, even what that looks like developmentally. And so, we'll just get started. And I'm going to go ahead and have each one of you introduce yourself and kind of let people know who you are. So I'll just start out with, if it's okay, I'm going to call out on my story work coach, Patria.
Hi. Just so good to be here. Delighted to see everybody and to be a part of this. And as Candace said, I'm a story work coach. I've been doing this work, the Allender theory story coaching for, I don't know, 8, 9 years, something like that. And my background professionally, though, is clinical nursing, and I did nursing for about 15 plus years. I haven't added them up all together, but really was able to transition to the mental wellness side and including recovery from trauma in just some really meaningful ways. So that's what I do full time now. I own this practice, The Broken and Beautiful, and contract with these 2 lovely ladies, along with some other people that do story work, spiritual direction. Janet has introduced herself, but we also have licensed mental health care. And so we just get to work really hard together, but also do some play together. And it's just a real gift to be a part of this team. So a little bit about me.
Yeah, thank you, Patria.
Yeah, thank you.
Janet, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Janet. I've been a licensed mental health counselor for the past 3 or 4 years, but have really been working in this field for a couple decades in higher education and in a church setting where I didn't need my license. So, but have been in private practice for about 4 years now. And I work primarily my specialty training area is in betrayal trauma. So I work a lot with women whose husbands have addictions to pornography, affairs, that type of thing. So dealing with a lot of that trauma that's happening right now, but then also it's often touching on trauma that they've had in their past and their childhood as well. So I do talk a lot about differentiation in my work with my clients.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Janet.
Mm-hmm.
Brenna, do you want to introduce yourself now?
Sure. My name is Sabrina Parker, and I am also a story work coach. I am new to story work, but I've been dealing in the trauma area for a few years now. I'm also trained in trauma healing as an advanced facilitator through the Trauma Healing Institute. And then, of course, I have the certified story work training and also somatic practices. Also certified in somatic IFS level 2 and narcissistic abuse recovery. I am also a survivor of emotional and psychological abuse, intimate partner. And so now I use my lived experiences and my training to help other women just get an understanding of what's going on in their relationship and steps that they can take to bring forth the hope, empowerment, and restoration to themselves.
Well, thank you. I just listening to all of you and then you kind of sharing a little bit of what I'm excited to hear more, but I'm just I'm realizing like we have a gold mine right here of just experience and wisdom and knowledge. And I want to just thank you so much, each one of you, for taking the time to share over these next few episodes. So, Sher, do you kind of want to kick us off here with maybe some questions?
Yes, we heard the webinar several weeks ago that you all did, and you were kind of bringing your voices forward in response to a community-wide situation that had taken place. But the webinar that you did was really on looking at the contrast of what is a healthy relationship versus an unhealthy relationship. And the things that you talked about, I felt were just so important and meaningful. And I think a lot of times we take for granted that we all know what a healthy relationship. We all know what an unhealthy relationship is, but I think sometimes we can be in an unhealthy relationship and not even know it. So I wonder if we could just take a couple of minutes and talk first about what are some of the hallmarks of a healthy relationship? And then what are some of the hallmarks of an unhealthy relationship? And just feel free to talk and, pass the baton back and forth and let it be conversational and free flowing. But yeah, so yeah, what are your thoughts on those?
I have so many thoughts on that. Yeah, go ahead, Janet. I could feel you thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, such a good question. And I liked what you said, Sher, about how so often we think we know what it is, or we think our relationship is fine until all of a sudden we realize it's not. And I think just being in a relationship where we are seen, where we're respected, where our voice is heard, where we feel connected, where we feel like we have the freedom to have our own opinions and our own preferences, that we're not being controlled, that we're accepted for who we are, even if we're different from the other person, and our beliefs and our preferences, likes, dislikes are different, that we can show up as our whole self, and that's okay, and that's welcomed. So that's just a few thoughts off the top of my head when I think about it.
I would add to that, all of that. I completely agree, and that disagreements are can be hard and sometimes even really hard, but they don't cost. I don't have to give up part of myself for peace to come back. I don't have to compromise something of myself for that relationship to stay secure and welcoming of myself, even in the disagreement. I would say that's a big part of healthy relationships.
Yeah, I like that you use the term, you don't have to compromise yourself, Patria, because I think that compromise is like something that people say is expected in a relationship. But I am asking the question now, why can why can't we collaborate instead of compromise? Because compromise means someone's going to have to give something up. Collaboration means let's find a way together that we both get what we want in this, relationship. So I am now a believer in collaboration over compromise because we are both looking at each other's wants, needs, and trying to help each other get there, and we're doing it together. So for me now, that's a big that's a big deal when it comes to having a healthy relationship, because then I know this person has my best interest at heart, and that when I do come to this person, my partner, with something, I'm not walking on eggshells. I'm not afraid of what the response would be, because I know that if I come to my partner, then I know we're going to work it out as a collaboration, and that no, I have to give something up again. So yeah.
Well, and Robrina, that makes me think we're not talking here about are we going to go eat Mexican or Italian? Right.
Right. Right.
And so these are issues. I don't believe what she's saying is that there aren't times like, okay, well, we'll have Mexican this Friday night for our date and we'll go to Italian because we both like different things. The issues that we're discussing here are those issues where like the compromise means that you are betraying yourself on what you know is good and right and true for you. Would that be, is that
Yes, yes, that's it exactly. That you don't have to give up a part of yourself in order to be in this relationship. You don't have to abandon yourself in order to be in
Yeah.
a relationship.
Yeah.
I love the
Which
things that
feel
have been named. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Patria.
Oh, sorry, Cher. I was just gonna say it feels like a good segue to what's unhealthy space right there, where even like I can like Candace and Robrina are saying, I can compromise. I can say, like I think Janet says in the webinar, she gives this example of I can choose to go to where you want for your birthday because I love you. And I might hate the place that you choose to go for your birthday, but that's different than asking me to do things or be ways that go against my value system or against what feels right inside my soul. That's a very different thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think that's a great segue into when we're looking at an unhealthy relationship, what does differentiation look like in that when we're starting to swim into something moving away from health?
One of the things I would say is if you feel like you are always the one making the sacrifice, if you feel like you're in a one-sided relationship, and sometimes that happens because a person may think, well, if I give this, then my partner will give that. But then the partner never does give that. So you're constantly being the one to give because you're trying to make the relationship work. And while you're doing that, it's chipping away at you because your needs are never getting met. Unmet needs are huge to me. That if you are constantly pouring out and pouring out and pouring out, your pitcher is going to get dry if someone's not pouring back into you. That is definitely not what you want to be. You should be able to differentiate that you get what you want sometimes too. It should not be a one-sided relationship.
Yeah, and I think when we think about differentiation, I often will, like on my whiteboard, I'll draw circles, but here, just imagine two circles. So with differentiation, we have the two people, they're two circles, where we sometimes will move closer or further apart, within a realm here. When we're getting into unhealthy places is when we're way far apart, which would be really detached and maybe cut off from people and we don't have any contact. And that would be an extreme. And another extreme would be if we're enmeshed, or sometimes people talk about codependent, where it's just one circle, basically, instead of two circles. And so there is some flexibility, there is some movement, like Robrina is talking about, and Patria mentioned too. And just that we do make adjustments sometimes, but it's not that we're completely overshadowed by the other person, and getting into that place where we don't have a separate identity from the other person. We're always thinking about what's going to be the consequence for me if I say this or if I do this, because it doesn't feel safe to do that. I can't have my own opinions. I feel controlled. I don't have freedom. Yeah.
Janet, I'm noticing as you're speaking, my body starting to feel amped up a little bit, just some low level anxiety. And I'm aware that what you're saying was true for me. as a child, it's interesting to me that just hearing you talk about that, now that I'm more body aware, I can name that. And so I'm wondering maybe if one of you want to talk a little bit about what does it look like for a child to Cher and I say this all the time. There is no perfect parent. It's impossible to be a perfect parent. And that's not even what we're going after. But what is something that looks consistent, even if it's, there's some rupture and repair, that a child is not enmeshed or goes into hyper avoidance and independence? Does that question make sense? No.
Well, I like you naming this, and I'll give you a second to think about that. I like you naming this because I was thinking about the question, where what causes us to lean toward the unhealthy, or what causes us to embrace even an unhealthy relationship that we stay in sometimes year after year after year, versus recognizing like there's something here I don't like and I want something better. And so my thought process as you were speaking was, can we talk about what causes us to become stuck in those unhealthy, relationships? And I think, Kandace, you're making the jump. Okay, we're taught it from a lot of times we're taught it from the very beginning. So I like your question. What can a parent do to help their child actually learn and experience differentiation? What can that even look like?
Well, I like to share.
It's a great question.
In my childhood, I was the caretaker. I was the oldest girl. So I was the caretaker, and everyone in the house knew it. I was going to take care of everything. I ran the household. My mother worked. She was a single parent off and on. But if anything went wrong, it was my fault. So I was the caretaker and the scapegoat of the family. That dynamic led me into the marriage I was in. And it wasn't until I was doing story work where it came to the surface where I realized, oh, the story that I brought is feeling like the same way I'm feeling in my marriage. The story of me when I was 9 years old is now connecting to what I'm experiencing in my marriage. And so I think the roles that we play in our childhood, the expectations from our family of origin, that is a huge connector to the type of relationships that we will encounter because it's familiar. Even if it's not something that we consciously want, it's a familiarity that we're accustomed to. And in my instance, it didn't look the same. It was vastly different, very in your face in my childhood, very subtle in the marriage. And so sometimes that's why you can't pick it up because it doesn't look the same, but it's a familiar feeling. And that's what we're drawn to based on our trauma.
Yeah. It makes me think of some conversations Patria and I have had about that initial, when you're starting to wake up, it feels so disruptive. Like, wait a minute, with this new information that I'm getting, now I'm more conscious about the choices that I'm making and why I'm making them. And I think for some people, that's why it's easy to go back and stay in the pattern, because there's anxiety, at least there was for me, in getting out of the pattern. Because I could no longer, it's like, once you see, you see.
Yeah, once you see, you can't unsee.
Right.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that, Rabrina. That, I just felt the heartbreak for that 9-year-old girl, really. The caretaker and the scapegoat. Wow, what a heavy, heavy burden. And thank you for sharing.
And yet, I mean, And thank you. I mean, yes, that, and yet the nuance that was coming to me too, as you were talking, Robrina, is it's all you had. So there is this sense of fulfillment when you can accomplish in a day or a moment or something like that. Like for me, what was coming to my mind there was to see my dad laugh just meant everything to me. And that took a lot. It just took a lot of watching him and walking on eggshells and being careful and adapting and appeasing. I wanted to put that word out here too, that appeasement.
Yes.
That actually it gets kind of complicated because it feels good in some ways when you can do that. But so getting clarity on this is actually not good for me is sometimes can't happen until adulthood for safety reasons.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think too, as children, we're doing those things. We're raised in that family system where that's normal. So it does feel familiar, even if it's not healthy. And I think that's why even sometimes when we see something, it's still we kind of go back and forth for a while too, where we might see something, but it's like, but that's scary. I don't know what that would look like to live that way. I'm going to go back into what feels familiar. And I think we do take those steps. I know that was part of my own journey through in different types of situations too, with different people of seeing it, but then, oh, that's so much work. To have to break out of this and going back to what feels comfortable and what feels in some sense safe because it's familiar, but it's not the kind of safety that's ultimately healthy for us. So we are trying, I think, as children to stay safe and to protect ourselves. And those things work sometimes for us as kids. And then as adults, if we're continuing to carry those patterns into our adult relationships, we start realizing, oh, this is taking too much a toll on me and who I am as a person. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep giving myself up over and over and over for the rest of my life. Maybe I could do that to cope, for a number of years in childhood, but that's not sustainable long term.
I want to add that also as a child, we have imagination. I can use that as a form of escapism, as a form of numbing, or our favorite TV show that we watch over and over and over again because it's a comfort. And so that's also part of it, the numbing of our feelings and our emotions, not allowing our body to actually feel what's happening because it's too painful. And I'm little, like, what can I do anyway? I don't have power in this situation. And then as you become older, and for instance, for me, I was 55 before I felt my body. And once I started feeling my body, I could not go back. Literally, my body was talking to me and, feeling like hot on the inside, feeling like prickly needles on the inside. Like I just couldn't do it. It became unbearable. And so it's the being able to sit in it, in the pain, the confusion, whatever it is, and listen to what your body is saying to you through sensations, through heat, through cold, like just having that ability to sense, notice, and listen. And that is something that can propel you forward.
Oh, that's so good. And so like what's coming up for me, especially being an 8 on the Enneagram, that I like to keep moving and get stuff done, Robrina, is that my healing began to um, move forward as I slowed down.
Mhm.
And I, and I know everybody is different in this way, but like for, one of my trauma responses was to keep going fast, right? And so I know that's different for everyone.
Mine's the same. keep going, stay busy, don't think.
Yeah.
For
I'd
me,
like
I
to
would
ask-
say, I was just going to add a component to that mentally I can keep moving and planning and that sort of numbing through imagination. Although I would love to talk about the recovery of imagination, but action, actually moving in action is probably for me particularly what's helped me unfreeze. Because Robrina's talking about the waking up from freezing. The pins and needles is literally a waking up from freezing. Yeah, the freeze response in trauma. Yeah. Sorry, I keep interrupting you, Sher.
Yeah, no, I wish we had like 6 hours because
Yes.
I want to ask though I want to go in one more direction before we close this episode. And that is, I would like us to talk a little bit about as we are awakening to our bodies and as we are recovering our imagination and as we're starting to realize like, ooh, I'm in a relationship and I have a lot of things going on here that don't feel good. We can start to take steps toward healing. We can start to make steps to see, can we do this relationship in a different kind of a way? And one of those steps, and you talked about this on the webinar, and that is setting boundaries. Why is setting boundaries? What can that look like, and why is this such an important aspect of a healthy relationship?
Yeah, as I was reflecting on that question from the email you sent earlier about this, I was just thinking about how similar boundaries are to healthy differentiation. So if we have healthy differentiation, we have healthy boundaries. Typically, if we've gone over into those overlapping circles into enmeshment, we're having to pull back out. We're having to define, who am I? What's mine to carry? What's my responsibility? What are my feelings? What are my emotions? Not the emotions of the other person that I'm so enmeshed with and so hyper aware of all the time because I have to be careful of their emotions. So, the whole walking on eggshells so that they're not upset with me or whatever. So as we start looking at that, it's looking at, but what am I feeling? What are my emotions? Who am I? What's my responsibility? And I think we have to get support if we're in that really enmeshed, especially if we're in a relationship with somebody who's angry, abusive, controlling, whether they're physically abusive, verbally, emotionally abusive, whatever that looks like, to expect that we're going to get pushed back when we start to pull back and say, but I really don't want to do this. So I think it's so important to have help, support around us. So whether that's healthy friends that can support us and encourage us and say, yes, you're on the right path, or a coach, a therapist, just a mentor, but we need to have somebody else because it's too hard to do this work on our own. We really have to have someone else to be there to be our cheerleader and to help us, because it's hard to start to say, no, I'm not going to allow this in this relationship anymore, or I'm going to do this differently. And I think to think about when we're setting boundaries, it's not about controlling the other person or getting them to do anything different. It's about looking at myself and what am I willing or unwilling to do anymore. And as a result of that, that will impact the other person, but it's not to control them. It's just, I'm saying I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to play by these rules anymore, basically. So I think, my biggest thing is we really need support as we do that. We need to have at least one other person that's in our corner.
And then I grabbed Judith Herman's book for this conversation. And Judith Herman is kind of a pioneer of trauma. She's an old school, just really good material. But her book, Trauma and Recovery, and in the title, the chapter titled Reconnection, she talks about learning to fight. And I feel that what Janet is describing involves a lot of this. And I'm just going to read a couple sentences. She says, taking power in real life situation often involves a conscious choice to face danger. And it can be emotional danger, it can be psychological danger. It doesn't have to be physical danger, but it can be that. But by this stage of recovery, survivors understand that their post-traumatic symptoms, most of us have complex PTSD or PTSD, their post-traumatic symptoms represent a pathological exaggeration of normal responses to danger. So that's our responsibility to manage. I'm having an overreaction to the danger in front of me sometimes. And only in the sense, not to say that the danger isn't as big as I think it is, but I am stronger than I think I am. And the other thing that really stood out to me was she has in quotes, I need to learn to say, no matter what I lose, I know I have myself. I have myself.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like we can end on that, but I feel like there's so much there.
For sure.
And we can actually come back and maybe start off there a little bit, because our next episode, we're going to be looking at trauma bonds, toxic bonds, unhealthy bonds, betrayal bonds. They're just bonds that are harming us. So thank you for just having this discussion in our first episode, and look forward to joining you again.